want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahushai, Bahashem, Brakakwadash. I want to give double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone, because those are the men who I learned this truth from through the spirit of power of Yahweh Bashem Shai. Yahweh is the true name of the God of Israel. Yahweh Shai is to the world ignorantly calls Jesus Christ, but his one and only true name is Yahweh Shai. Pretty much this video is going to be about a bill of divorce. I'm going to go into it, the direct way concerning a marriage between a man and his women. All right. I'm not going to be going into it, the spiritual part when you read in Jeremiah, the 3rd chapter, and plenty of other scriptures in the Old Testament, how the Most High gave Israel a bill of divorce, kicking us out of the promised land temporarily until Yahushua brings us back, because we broke the law, statutes, and commandments. Therefore, the curses of Deuteronomy, the 28th chapter, came upon the seed line of Israel, all 12 tribes, being the so-called Negroes, Hispanics, and Native American Indian seed line, scattered to the four corners of the earth. So the Most High, he gave us a bill of divorce for committing fornication and idolatry, following the way of the heathen. But this video mainly is inspired based off of the current events that's currently going on within Israel. I'm not really going to go into it because I really don't care, but what's currently going on, with particular individuals and their marriages, you could use it for edification. All right, because I'm always looking for a topic to do a video on, concerning the gospel and the correct doctrine. Now let's get into it. So this is what I typed in, bill of divorce, right? KJV. So this is the AI. It says in the King James Version of the Bible, a bill of divorce or bill of divorcement refers to the legal certificate required under the Mosaic law for a man to divorce his wife. Because when you read it in the scriptures, I'm going to let the scriptures speak, but a woman is not allowed to divorce her man. And if she did do that, she has to remain unmarried. She's bonded to that man, whether he's a believer or unbeliever. All right. It says key references to this document in the KJV include Deuteronomy chapter 24, verse 1, outlines the original allowance, stating that if a man finds some uncleanness in his wife, he shall write her a bill of divorce and gave it in her hand and send her out of his house. So that's what I want to get into. So this is the NLT version because it's more simplified. All right. Sometimes when you read the KJV, you read in the King's English because that's how it's written, but it's written in Old English. It could just throw you off sometimes. All right. It's a lot of tongue twisters sometimes. So the NLT is better. So Deuteronomy 24:1. It says, suppose a man marries a woman, but she does not please him. You have that sometimes. These women, they're not consistent. They switch up on you. They get too comfortable, right? They start thinking, oh, he's never going to leave me. I could act any type of way I want to act. Nope. You always got to be consistent. Having discovered something wrong with her, with this her attitude, she probably ain't moving fast enough. She's lazy. She's not accountable. She may try to weaponize her emotions on you for the purpose of control. You may slowly see bad patterns turn into things that are explosive and threatening to your relationship, right? He writes a document of divorce, hands it to her, and sends her away from his house. So these are how things were done in the ancient world. Obviously, we're under a westernized, Romanized system. So the law, statutes, and commandments is not the laws of the land. These are customs, which are Eastern customs, that were done when we were sovereign and independent in ancient Israel, meaning in the past. When she leaves his house, she is free to marry another man. So if a man gave his wife in the ancient world a bill of divorce, she's free to marry another man. Why? Because they're following the law. They're getting a divorcement or a divorce according to the law. All right, that man gives that woman the bill of divorce. He kicks her out of the house. You know, the elders of Jerusalem know about it. Everything is finalized according to the Mosaic law. And according to the law, she can have another husband. It's not considered adultery. All right. When she leaves his house, she is free to marry another man because she's no longer under that yoke of being under that man. But if the second husband, right? Now the second husband talk about the new husband that she remarries, but if the second husband also turns against her, writes a bill of divorce, hands it to her, and sends her away, or if he dies, right, the first husband may not marry her again. So no matter what happens, you know, your so-called ex-wife, if her husband, the new husband, dies, right, she becomes a widow, meaning that she can remarry. But because you that used to be the first husband, that used to be the husband, gave her a bill of divorce, that disqualifies you from taking her back. Now in this society, obviously it's messed up because you got people that forgive their so-called spouse or, you know, wives for cheating on them. They give them another chance. You know, me personally, I don't give second chances. I'm just one and done. All right. Which is according to the scriptures. You know, scriptures talk about being a Jew inwardly, first according to the spirit, but there's just laws that you just naturally keep. It's like common sense. But it says, for she has been defiled, right? Because if he gave her a bill of divorce and she left out of his house, meaning they're separate, they're no longer together. She doesn't have to be under his authority or leadership and his household rules, right? She got with another man, they had sex, obviously, right? He dies or he gives her a bill of divorce. If she goes back to that first guy, that's considered adultery because he gave a bill of divorce. That's no longer his woman. It says that would be detestable to the Lord because that would be adultery. You must not bring guilt upon the land. The Lord your God, which is interpreted Yahweh our God, because the word Lord is in caps, is giving you as a special possession. Going back to what? Genesis 15, verses 18 to 21, the promised land of Israel. All right? So it says, so that's it with that. I don't need to get into that. So now, I also want to read this. AHDAWAM. I just typed in Deuteronomy chapter 24, verses 1 through 4 meaning, right? And when I type stuff like this in the AHDAWAM overview, this is based off of what I already know and learned from the apostles of Great Millstone through the Holy Spirit. So I like to type in specific verses to see if it's going to match up with what I've already been taught, in case you was wondering, all right? Deuteronomy chapter 24, verses 1 through 4 meaning is a specific case law outlining the legal procedures for divorce and remarriage in ancient Israel. The passage details three main points. A man divorces his wife for some indecency. She marries another man, and that marriage ends. The ruling is that the first husband is strictly forbidden from remarrying her because remarrying equal what? Having sex with another man's woman now. That's not your woman no more. You gave her a bill of divorce, right? As doing so is considered an abomination because that's adultery. It says the core meaning and historical context. The ground for divorce. The passage mentions the husband finding some indecency, often translated as uncleanness or nakedness of a thing. It could be anything, right? In ancient Israelite tradition, I don't like that word Jewish. In ancient Israelite tradition, there was a wide debate over what this meant. It says, conservative scholars argue it meant gross sexual indecency or infidelity short of full adultery, which carried the death penalty, while more liberal interpreters took it to mean anything that displeased the husband. That's what it means, all right? She did something that displeased her husband, some uncleanness. It could be anything. It could just be something small. It could be bad patterns over time. The man is just sick of repeating himself. He can't take it no more, right? The divorce certificate. The law requires the husband to write a formal certificate of divorce. This legal document protected the vulnerable woman, proving she was legally separated so she could move on, remarry, and not be falsely accused of adultery. The reason for prohibition. The law explicitly forbids the original husband from remarrying his ex-wife after she has been married to someone else. She is described as defiled regarding her first marriage. This restriction was intended to prevent exploitative practices like wife swapping, like swingers, right? Cuckold, shit like that. Disgusting, gross, demonic shit like that. Or a husband using his ex-wife as a bargaining chip or property after she had established a new life. Because you got Edomites and heathens that do these practices. All right. That's why the heathen nations, they need to be civilized under our authority. It says, okay, so that's it with that. I don't really give a damn what scholars gotta say. It says centuries later in the New Testament, when religious leaders tried to use this passage to justify easy divorce, Yahweh Mashiach clarified the passage. In Matthew 19, verses 7 through 9, Yahweh explained that Moses allowed this only as a legal protection, but reaffirmed that Yahweh's original perfect design for marriage was lifelong. All right? Because really, when a man get a wife, he's supposed to be with her forever. All right? All right, so that's it with that. Let's close that out. Let's keep it going. Let's see what else they got here. So they got that. So now let's read this in the G&T version. This is the book of Sirach, known as the book of Ecclesiasticus, chapter 25, and this is the G&T, the Good News Translation. Sirach, known as Ecclesiasticus 25 and verse 26. It says, if she won't do as you tell her, aka the uncleanness, aka some form of indecency, divorce her. You're not, look, I don't give a fuck what nobody gotta say. You don't have to be stuck with no woman. Right now, we're under grace anyway. You don't gotta feel like you an animal in a cage and you have to deal with this woman. If you're the woman that don't fucking listen to you and her patterns is getting worse and worse, you constantly repeating yourself over and over and over and over again, or you tell her something like, oh, I don't like you on social media, like little small shit that's supposed to get nipped in the butt quick. Look, don't even waste your time with shit like that. And then don't have kids. Your woman is supposed to be in order. She's supposed to listen to you. And you're supposed to display strong leadership qualities and characteristics. You're supposed to put your foot down, all right? You ain't supposed to obviously abuse your woman, verbally abuse her, but you got to keep her in straightly, all right? Because if you don't do that, she going to lose respect for you over time. And, next thing you know, because she don't have that fear of losing you, then guess what's going to happen? She going to end up committing adultery on you, all right? So there you go. So I'll read it again, G&T. If she won't do as you tell her, divorce her. You don't got to be stuck with her, all right? You cut it off. That's it. And technically, according to the scriptures, a woman, she's not allowed to remarry if she don't have a bill of divorce. If she get mad at her husband for her immature, childish ways, if she get Salaki, I should have put do not disturb on. I hate when people text me while I'm doing a video. But yeah, if she don't listen, you don't have to deal with that. You cut it off, find something better, or just be alone. That's why Paul said it'd be better if you don't even have a wife. All right? So now, let's see. Let's go here. Let's go here now. So it says, Matthew chapter 5, verse 31, and Matthew chapter 19, verse 7 mentions how the Lord permitted this practice, which Yahweh later addresses regarding the scarceness of marriage. And what Yahweh pretty much taught, which I'm going to get it, he said that what? If a woman is going to leave her husband, which is against the scriptures, she should not remarry, because the moment she remarry, she's still under that man's yoke. That's still his possession. That's still his wife. So if she has sex with another man, that's adultery. Now she got to get put to death without mercy. All right? Because the law doesn't prohibit, or the law doesn't allow a woman to give a man a bill of divorce. All right? If for some reason she don't want to be with that man, she's supposed to just remain alone. All right? Remain alone and celibate. So, yep. So that's pretty much it with that. So let me actually type that in. Matthew 5:31, Matthew 19, Matthew 5, blue letter. Okay, let's see, Matthew 5:31. I'm gonna read it in the NLT. Actually, no, let's start off with the KJV. So Matthew 5:31, speeding this up, it says, It have been said, whoever shall put away his wife, let him give her a writing of divorcement, because it's going to go into it. All right. And this is what you people need to understand. Yahweh, he came in the volume of the book. He came to fulfill the law, not to abolish the law. How else could he be a perfect sacrifice if he didn't keep the law, statutes, and commandments? Verse 32, but I say unto you that whosoever shall put away his wife, saving for the cause of fornication, causeth her to commit adultery. Exactly. So you got to be mindful of things. This certain woman, just as the Lord, Yahweh and Yahweh have patience with us and the church, you got to have patience with your woman as well. All right. But you don't let her step all over you. You don't let her get her way. You communicate with your woman. All right. You let her know, like, look, what you doing right now, I don't like it. You in danger of losing me. And trust that time. Let her think about that. Because if your woman is not afraid to leave you, then, I don't know why you with her. Your woman is supposed to be terrified if you leave her. All right. You don't need to verbally abuse your woman. You don't need to abuse your woman at all. Hit your woman. All right. You don't need to do shit like that. You communicate with them and that's it. But how many times you going to keep on repeating yourself? So that's that uncleanness if they don't fucking listen. You going to go through that for months and years? You feel like you trapped with her? Come on. Matthew 5:32, but I say unto you that whosoever shall put away his wife, saving for the cause of fornication, causeth her to commit adultery. You can't just put her away for no reason. There got to be like a real valid reason according to the scriptures, according to your walk in this truth. All right? Because if you just put a woman away and she's pleased to dwell with you, you're going to cause her to commit adultery. Women don't like to be alone. It says, and whosoever shall marry her that is divorced committed adultery. So now let's read this in the NLT. Let's see if it's like a little more simplified. Matthew 5:31. And this is Yahweh teaching about divorce. You can also read about it in Matthew chapter 19, verse 9, Mark chapter 10, verse 11 and 12, Luke 16:18. Matthew 5:31. You have heard the law that says a man can divorce his wife by merely giving her a written notice of divorce. But I say that a man who divorces his wife, unless she has been unfaithful, causes her to commit adultery. Exactly. Yeah, so if your woman, technically, if your woman hasn't committed adultery, then you shouldn't put her away. You need to just communicate with her and trust her, like, look, like, I'm noticing bad patterns, it's getting worse, you're making me repeat myself too much. If you don't change, you're gonna, I'm gonna abandon you. All right. See, I don't play that shit. I don't know about y'all, but I don't play that. I don't like repeating myself, really at all. I don't like repeating myself. But anyways, Matthew 5:32. The scriptures also talk about not being a lion in your own house. A lot of times, these men, they become a lion in their own house because these women, they don't fucking listen. They still got that westernized Jezebel equality spirit. All right. Now, obviously, if you're dealing with an unbelieving woman, that's going to require more patience. All right. But if you're dealing with a woman that knows she's an Israelite and you repeating yourself as much as you would with an unbelieving woman that's in the world, then yeah, I don't know what to tell you, bro. You know, you just better pray to the Most High that He put the correct spirit on, because that's crazy to deal with. It says Matthew 5:32 NLT. But I say that a man who divorces his wife, unless she has been unfaithful, causes her to commit adultery. You got to have a valid reason to just, put a woman away. You can't just put her away just asked out for no reason. Because maybe you immature. Maybe you ain't ready to be a strong leader for your wife. And anyone who marries a divorced woman also commits adultery. Because ultimately, the Lord intended marriage to be forever. All right? Just like under the new covenant, we're going to be married to Yahweh, Yahawashi forever. That's how the Lord, created marriage. That's how He intended marriage to be. All right? No divorce. So that's it with that. Now, let's go here now. Let's go to that Matthew right there. NLT. This is Matthew 19:7. It says, you know what? I got to start up. Okay. Matthew 19:1. This is also found in Mark 10:1-12. This is about a discussion about divorce and marriage. When Yahushua had finished saying these things, he left Galilee and went down to the region of Judea east of Jordan River. Large crowds followed him there, and he healed their sick. Some Pharisees came and tried to trap him with the question, should a man be allowed to divorce his wife for just any reason? Haven't you read the scriptures? Yahushua replied, because they always try to challenge him. You're going to have men like that that's in this truth too. They just want to challenge you and shit. It's annoying. But let's see how Yahushua handled these assholes. It says, they record that from the beginning, Yahweh made them male and female. And he said, this explains why a man leaves his father and mother and is joined to his wife. And the two are united into one. Because technically, when you get in a relationship, you're going to be living with your woman. You're going to get her pregnant. You don't want to be living in your parents' house. All right. It says, verse 6, since there are no longer two but one, let no one split apart what Yahweh has joined together. That's how Yahweh intended marriage to be. Technically ain't really supposed to be a divorce, but it's going to happen because we're in this flesh. All right. It says, then why did Moses say in the law that a man could give his wife a written notice of divorce and send her away? They asked. Yahushua replied, Moses permitted divorce only as a concession to your hard hearts, meaning your heart and mind, but it was not what Yahweh had originally intended. There you go. And I tell you this, whoever divorces his wife and marries someone else commits adultery unless his wife has been unfaithful. So what is Yahushua encouraging? For you to communicate with your wife, have patience as Yahweh and Yahushua has patience on the church, the elect of the nation of Israel, ultimately all Israel, and try to work things out with your wife. All right, don't just be a hothead and just cast her off, because then you're going to cause her to commit adultery. Communicate with your wife. Learn how to fucking talk. All right, some men, they don't do that. They just get mad. Some of them become lions in their own home, tyrants. You ain't supposed to do that. You're dealing with a delicate, emotional creature that need to be led. So, you communicate with your possession. You the leader. Now, she don't listen, and the patterns is getting worse. That's uncleanness right there. That's a problem. You ain't stuck with that shit. So that's it with that. So it says, Yahushua's disciples then said to him, if this is the case, it is better not to marry. Exactly. You don't got your finances in order. You can't take care of your woman. You can't be a provider. It's better for you to just be alone, bro. especially if you're in the truth. All right. Now the scriptures tell you you ain't if you burning, you should marry, right? But at the end of the day, hey, in your spirit, if you feel like you a eunuch, then that's it. Just dedicate your life to the Most High. That's it. Study and focus on the truth. Continuing on, it says, not everyone can accept this statement. Yahweh said, yeah, some brothers, look, I'm a brother. I need, okay, I need to be dealing with women. Some brothers are like that. All right. Let's keep it going. It says, because some brothers, they eunuchs. That's okay. That's all right. It says, yep. It says, some are born as eunuchs. Some have been made eunuchs by others. And some choose not to marry for the sake of the kingdom of heaven. Let anyone accept this who can. Exactly. All of us is different. Just don't try to force your personality on me, because I don't have to follow that. All right? And no man has to follow that. If a man, because of his faith, feel like he's a eunuch, then that's fine. That's between you and the Most High. Romans 14:22. Has thou faith, have it to thyself before the Most High. That's it. That's between you and the Most High. But don't force that personality on other brothers, though. All right? That's it. So now let's go here. So now I want to read this. I'm going to close the lesson. Exodus 24 and 10. I'm going to read the NLT. See what it says. Exodus 21 and 10. It says, if a man who has married a slave wife takes another wife for himself, right? Now this is going into the Hebrew servant, but continuing on, it says takes another wife for himself, because you can have more than one wife, but what's your finances? All right, what's your resources? Can you support having multiple women, or you just are lusting? It says, he must not neglect the rights of the first wife to food, clothing, and sexual intimacy. All right, meaning you ain't supposed to just shun the other wife, because that's how you have problems in your household. And some men that are polygamous, you having this problem because of this law right here. When you have multiple women, that's a lot of time and attention. That's a lot you got to deal with. So a lot of times you have problems in your household because you're shunning the other wife of sexual intimacy. All right. Maybe, you don't do the things that you used to do because you spending all this time with the other wife. That leads to jealousy. All right. That leads to demons fucking with her. Right. So it says, if he fails in any of these three obligations, food, clothing, sexual intimacy, right? AKA just being a provider. Some men, they not providers. Some men is really bums, for real. Some men is just bums. It says, if he fails in any of these three obligations, she may leave as a free woman without making any payment. And this law strictly was dealing with the Hebrew servant law, all right? But ultimately, if you can't be a provider, if you can't be a man, you don't have your finances straight, ultimately, you got to pray to the Most High for the one of all things, all right? But if you can't provide your women with, food, clothing, sexual intimacy, you just only giving it to just one wife, the other wife, not to be too vulgar, but she horny, she alone and shit, then you're gonna have issues, bro. It's better she don't even live with you. It says, if he fails in any of these three obligations, she may leave as a free woman without making any payment. All right? So there you go. And like I said, verses 10 and 11, it was really dealing with the laws of the Hebrew servant. But let's see what Google got to say about this, the AI. So I typed in Exodus 21, verses 10 and 11. It says, outlines ancient biblical laws protecting the rights of a wife, often a female servant married into the family, if her husband takes an additional wife. It mandates that he cannot reduce her basic provisions or martial rights. And if he fails to provide them, you have to be a provider. All right. There's a difference between simping and being a provider. If a woman is your wife, you as a man is supposed to provide for your wife. If you can't do that, why are you having sex with this woman? What if you get her pregnant? Okay, the Most High, he don't like deadbeats. He don't like shit like that. You a fucking infidel. You can't take care of your woman, but you want to, have sex with all these women without being accountable if they get pregnant or not. Come on, man. It says she must be set free without any financial penalty, right? It says, that's the NIV version. Key details about Exodus 21, verses 10 and 11. The protections. A husband is required to maintain 3 specific obligations: food, clothing, and martial and conjugal rights. The penalty. If he takes a new wife but fails to uphold these duties for the first wife, she is granted an unconditional release. Because how is she going to survive with a guy that's a bum? You a bum. You're not a provider. So what's she going to do? She just going to starve to death? Come on, man. She can leave the marriage without having to pay anything back to secure her freedom. The context. This passage is part of broader civil and social laws given to the Israelites designed to protect vulnerable members of society from neglect, exploitation, or abuse within the household. All right? So that's the point. Every woman is different, but at the end of the day, if you're going to have multiple women, understand that that's a lot of time and attention that could be taken away from the truth, and ultimately that could be a burden on you long term. Especially if you're living with multiple women and you only get one woman pregnant and the other one feel left, that type of shit could happen. So you just want to be mindful of that. If you're going to have multiple wives, you're going to have to equally give attention to all of them, or else you're going to have problems. All right? You giving one wife sex, but you ain't giving the other one sex, that's a problem, bro. That's a problem. Scriptures warn you about that. So that's pretty much it. All right? So, Lord willing, he was edified. Shalom.